is Paul. Yes. There's a place called China. Yes. In Eastern Asia. Mhm. Now, they have a population of approximately 1,400,000,000 individuals. Yes. Now, 92% of are Han Chinese. Yes, yes. hmm And their currency is the yuan. Now, I've been talking to the Chinese about this idea of of getting divorced in the United States, where they don't enforce the United Nations conventions as a nation. Yes, they don't enforce the humanitarian rights as a nation. Yeah. And then I just needed to know of all the individuals that have gotten divorced in the United States. Yes. Excuse me. Yes. How many of them moved to China thinking that, well, I wouldn't have to pay child support? Now, this idea of two reference numbers, yes, where if I move to China, the United States would say, well, we have to enforce the Hague International Convention of Child Support Payments. Yep. Just like we have to enforce the Hague International Convention of Service of Process. Now, I mentioned the service of process that you don't acknowledge forgeries of the ex officio Superior Court clerk, and you don't acknowledge the fraud of issuing a protection order. You don't acknowledge that my custody rights were violated when you issued a dissolution of marriage. No. Of every individual in China where their marriage was the United Nations, yes. Could you call the Chinese government in Beijing? Yes. Now, in the last few days, I kind of mentioned $1 trillion lawsuit. I'm just going to need to know how many Americans actually had their wages garnished when employed in China for the last 20 years. Yeah. Then how many Americans got served in China when courts issued service of process? Yeah. And then of all the Chinese where it was a United Nations marriage certificate, because I know over here in America we think this is something special for myself. Not like any Chinese wherever refugees or married some refugee in the third, fourth nation. But I think the Chinese are going to be in for $1 trillion when I get done. Xi Jinping. Now, why don't you get me the actual child support enforcement orders? Yeah. For every divorce of every American citizen that moved to China where they had their wages garnished. Yeah. And then all the Americans where the Chinese had to serve them an actual court order or notice of a pending court hearing. Yes, yes, yes. Now, as much as we wouldn't think, okay, that the Chinese would have any liability in this, I'm thinking they do. So now over here, China, I've been informing the American government in 2,600,000 emails. Yes, yes, yes. Of forgery, um, of fraud. Yes, of international child abduction. Yep, kidnapping. The issuance of a dissolution of marriage where I didn't have any due process, where the marriage certificate was from the United Nations. Yes. And then just in the last couple of days, I mean, maybe it was yesterday, I found out that the American government allowed for two dissolutions of marriage to be issued, where they could change reference numbers anytime they wanted to serve me twice in a foreign nation. Or maybe I'm working in a different state and they say, well, actually, your child support payments went on that reference number. They didn't go on that reference number. Yes, yes. A lot of corporations would get confused, especially if I was working for an American corporation in China. Yes. Because human resources would say, well, we garnished your wages, and I'd have to say, well, which of the two reference numbers did you apply the child support payments to? Now, if the Chinese would really consider the liability of the knowledge of this,